The following is distributed by the Berean Call.
This is our Understanding the Scripture segment, and we're in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 16, and we're going to pick up with verse 19. And when her masters saw that the hope of their gains was gone, they caught Paul and Silas and drew them into the marketplace unto the rulers. And of course, the reference here is this woman who had masters. She was into divination. She had a spirit, and supposedly impressed people with I think the false idea, but that she could tell them the future. But anyway.
Well, she may have been revealing things about the present also that they didn't think she could know. Of course, demons would know that. These unscrupulous masters, or their owners, the slave owners of this woman, actually, they're making money off of her, and I suppose they're giving her a percentage. But anyway, they don't know how she does this, and they wouldn't care whether this was an evil spirit. But Paul cast the evil spirit out of her, and she lost her supposed supernatural powers. That's all they're upset about.
Right.
Their business has been ruined.
Verse 20, and brought them to the magistrates, saying, These men, being Jews, do exceedingly trouble our city, and teach customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans.
Well, Tom, I have in my Bible kind of drew a little square around that phrase, being Jews. What does that have to do with it? So you see anti-Semitism, way back. It's been going on for many, many centuries. And
well, obviously, if they were Jews who believed in their scriptures, they didn't participate in bringing these guys any money. They didn't buy into this. Correct? The people who were there?
Right, but apparently there weren't any Jews in the city, it seems, because they're blaming this on them being Jews. I guess Jews were not accepted, or I don't know, Tom. But anyway, it sounds a little anti-Semitic, and with good reason, because way back in Deuteronomy, God warned his people through Moses that if they disobeyed him, they would be cast out of the land, scattered everywhere, and hated and persecuted like no other people. And of course that came true. So although the Jews and Israel, although they're under God's protection right now, woe to those who attack them, nevertheless they are at the same time under God's judgment. And we see just a little picture of that here. They're troubling our city. How are they troubling our city? Verse 21, and teach customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans. I don't think Paul and Silas were teaching customs. That was the very thing they were opposed to. It's not by works of righteousness. They were teaching grace, salvation by faith through grace.
And the multitude rose up together against them, and the magistrates rent off their clothes and commanded to beat them. And when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely, who, having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison and made their feet fast in the stocks.
Tom, I don't think they were in a comfortable chair with their feet in the stocks. They're lying on their backs. Their bloodied, ripped up backs from the scourging that they've just received in the muck and dirt, and you don't know what all there was there. And you can see the problem with a mob. You can arouse a mob, and of course this is what we've got around the world with Islam today. For example, the uproar over the Danish cartoons, and you had mobs all over the world, burning down buildings, killing people, rioting, and so forth. Or you had mob action there in Paris and various parts of France with the Muslims.
I think about over in Israel where two soldiers made a wrong turn into Ramallah, where Arafat was.
Well, but Tom, they weren't even in uniform, as I recall. They're just Jews,
Right.
like this, recognizing
And they
Jews.
were beaten to death. The atrocities. This mob just tore them apart, literally.
Literally tore them apart, but they took refuge in it. They managed to get into a police station, and we have a video of them being thrown out of the second story of the police station. The police would not protect them, and they threw them down to the tender mercies of this mob. Wow. Well, this is the heart of man that we've been talking about, and it shows how you can whip up. Of course, Hitler was a master at that. When you see some of the videos of the mob he had in front of him by the hundreds of thousands, and he could get them aroused to do almost anything. It's a tragedy because people, you take comfort in a mob action. It's something I'd really like to be violent. I'd really like to smash some windows downtown, and get in there and take some stuff out. But if I did it all alone, they'd get me. That'd be breaking the law. But if we can get a whole mob together, then it's okay. Now we're justified in this. And tragically, the media justifies what these terrorists, Muslims, are doing against Israel. They blame Israel for it. And I don't recall that they blamed Islam for I don't recall that they blamed Islam for the riots in Paris. Never did that come out that I know of. Maybe some obscure writer mentioned it. But it was finally justification for these people. Well, but they didn't have jobs, and they were being discriminated against, and they need some more social programs for them.
Yeah. And, of course, the society wouldn't let them assimilate, right? Oh, brother. How wrong. Dave, Paul and Silas's reaction to this, it really grips your heart. How could they, after being their backs torn to shreds, how do they react to this? Are they bitter? Are they yelling and screaming at the jailer, and this is unfair, and so on and so forth?
They're lying on their backs with their feet up, bare backs probably.
Well, here it is, verse 25. And at midnight Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. Wow.
It must have been a shock. What a testimony of the prisoners. But I rather suspect prior to that time they were preaching the gospel to these prisoners. That's what Paul and Silas were about. They went everywhere preaching the gospel. That's why they came to Philippi. And that's what they were doing when they were arrested and beaten. So I'm sure they were telling the gospel, telling the good news to the prisoners. And then they begin to sing. They pray and they begin to sing praises to God. Wow, what a testimony. That must have really impressed the fellow prisoners. They've never seen anything like this.
And more so than what takes place next, verse 26. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bands were loosed.
It's amazing, Tom. Of course, I think they recognize the connection between these men and their praise of God and the gospel and the earthquake. Every man's bands were loosed, but later on, Paul says, verse 28, he says, we're all here because the The keeper of the prison, waking out of his sleep, seeing the prison doors open, he drew out his sword and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had been fled. That was the penalty. A prisoner escaped, they kill you. Wow, that was tough in those days. But Paul cried with a loud voice, saying, "Do thyself no harm. We're all here." Now, why would all those prisoners stay? Tom, they must have been converted. It doesn't say that, but they've had a change of hearts. They recognize something miraculous is going on.
And then he called for a light and sprang in and came trembling and fell down before Paul and Silas and brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" That's the great question, Dave. And next week, the Lord willing, we'll provide the answer from the Scriptures.
Very good.
Please visit our website, thebereancall.org, to access our radio archives going back to 1999 and our newsletter going back to 1986. We offer daily updates by email or visit us on Facebook or Twitter. Are you looking for information about a specific topic? Go to thebereancall.org and click on Topics at the top of the page. Our online store is thebereancall.com. We offer a wide variety of books, tracts, CDs, and DVDs. Note that most of our ebooks are free. I'm Gary Carmichael. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you can join us again next week. Until then, we encourage you to search the Scriptures 24/7.
Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back.